you say this because the SJB decimated the UNP at the last election. It was not even close. Mr. Wickremesinghe's votes some say were not counted, but some say were under 20,000. Since that election, or especially over the last 3 to 4 months, let's say 3 months, the SJB has lost 2 or 3 very prominent members of parliament. They've crossed over, become independent. Generally speaking, there's a criticism of the opposition, especially amongst the urban populace, whereas let's say the people on social media, the liberals, who believe that there's been multiple missteps by Sajith Premadasa. So one is that they criticize him for not accepting the Prime Minister's post when it was offered to him by Gotabaya. 2 is that they object to the fact that he let Dulles run and he didn't run in the parliamentary presidential election. So there seems to be a sort of narrative that's being built up, especially within Colombo and in the Colombo-centric media especially, where they're sort of saying that, the opposition is also a problem. The opposition is also not part of the solution. So could you give us some idea of the dynamics? Mr. Premadasa has been very clear that he doesn't feel comfortable working with the current group in Parliament and on the cabinet. And he's been very clear that he wants to support the government. Even just yesterday, he was talking about a committee system, which I think has a lot of potential. So could you just give us a rough idea of where the political dynamics are right now?
There is a very famous saying, if you lay with dogs, you wake up with ticks. Right? It has been commonly used whenever people go and associate people that they're not supposed to associate and land themselves in trouble. They say you lay with dogs and you wake up with ticks. Now, how do you expect? Are we going to choose morals, ethics and principles over deals? Are we going to do that? And as a society, if we are okay with doing that, then I guess there is a serious deterioration in society. These are failed and hated members that Mr. Wickremesinghe has gone and had this unholy alliance with. Now everyone, Kusum, blames Gotabaya Rajapaksa for this, right? Was it Gotabaya Rajapaksa really by himself? What about the ministers who are holding portfolios now? I'm not going to go into names, but almost all the people holding portfolios with the government now are people who were very much part and parcel of the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime. Have you ever heard them apologize? Have you ever heard them go in front of the public and say, look, I know, we kind of messed up and that's the reason we're in this mess? None of them have taken any responsibility. When the Muslim forced cremations were taking place, have any minister in this cabinet who was there in the Pohot tour come out and said, this is wrong? They were justifying it. They were saying, this is science and we need to stick by science. When the second largest population in the world, in terms of religion, was being persecuted in this country, who was standing up for it? I'll tell you who was standing up for it. I was doing it in Weligama, but I was given leadership by Mr. Premadasa. Mr. Premadasa was one of the only leaders who was openly speaking about forced cremations, right? And this disastrous agricultural policy, has any of them come and apologize to the public? None of them have apologized. And how was this whole union created? This union was created because Mr. Wickremesinghe was not patient enough to give the SJB a few more days. Because the president was isolated. Mahinda Rajapaksa, former President Rajapaksa was in a Trincomalee Naval Air Base. Nama Rajapaksa was also not in the picture. One of his sons had left the country by that time. And his political machinery, the Pohot 2 had crumbled down to zero. And just like what you see in an ICU bed when you come and give a person oxygen, imagine the bed was Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the oxygen machine was Ranil Wickremesinghe. Right? He accepted this without any conditions. Right? Which is why Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa thought that it's apt to give it to him. But what if he waited for another 3 days? The protest would have amplified. The goal-face green, the Aragalaya, which now everyone in Colombo are criticizing after getting their job done. They used Aragalaya to send one man home, and now they have, started condemning the Aragalaya and now is in love with a bigger oppressor than the one that they sent home. Now, when you think about it, I think it should have been Gota stay home. It shouldn't have been Gota go home, because there is a stark difference in the level of what we expected from Gotabaya and what we expect from Ranil Wickremesinghe. But that being said, Kusum, if we waited a few more days, they would have caved in. Now people would have said, yeah, could have, would have, and whatever. But yeah, that's what would have happened. But instead, he went and accepted the premiership. Now, what did that do? That gave some sort of legitimacy to the Pohottuwa type. And he made sure, Mr. Wickremesinghe, that he would let the Aragalaya continue up until such time that the president left. But the minute that the president left, he squashed the Aragalaya at 2 in the morning with the military, right? So when he tells people that you have a right to protest, you can't tell those people and give them an option on what they should protest about. If they want to protest about Gota go home, they have the right to do that. But they also have the right to protest about Ranil go home. So Mr. Wickremesinghe can't choose when the protest starts and when it ends. If it starts with the people, it ends with the people. It doesn't start with the people and end with the ruler. But what did he do? He used Aragalaya. He used Aragalaya to send President Gotabaya Rajapaksa home, squash the Aragalaya in one day, prove that he is a bigger dictator. I think, to be very honest with you, Kusum, even I didn't see that coming. I would have never in a million years thought that Mr. Wickremesinghe will order the attack that he ordered on the Aragalaya on that day. These were protesters who were going to leave at 2 p.m. the next day. And then he created this narrative where he said that the majority of the Aragalaya are fascist. And he used his house being burnt. He used that to his advantage. He said, my house was burnt, but I'm still standing by the constitution. And he has now twisted the narrative. And the mainstream media also has played a big role in it. And now the very Aragala people who actually helped us out of this mess are now being arrested on a daily basis. And who is standing by them? And Kusum, if you remember, Mr. Wickremesinghe called them terrorists. What are terrorists? Terrorist or terrorism is when armed combatants, let them be part of the civilian movement or whatever, armed combatants trying to overthrow the state or try to achieve their means through armed combat. So can you call the Aragalaya types for going and sitting on a president's chair terrorist? No. That's what you call a revolt. But it is not, they are not terrorists. But look at that narrative that they have spun now. Right? So these are few of the reasons why Mr. Premadasa finds it difficult to work with them. And how can we work? Now they say for the sake of the country, right? For the sake of the country at what cost? Is it to sacrifice our morals? Is it to sacrifice our ethics? Is it to sacrifice our principles? So at what cost are we going to do this? And what is the end objective going to be? What is the end objective out of this? The fact is that we have to work with the Pohottuwa and we are not willing to do that. So I, for one, and I'm saying this on a popular media show, that I am against the national government. I am against the national government in accepting ministries. I do not think we should accept ministries. Because once we get into that boat, Mr. Premadasa may even lose his opposition leader post.
Yes.
That could be another game plan that Mr. Wickremesinghe is trying to push us into. So what I'm saying is, let us help through committees. Has there ever been a time in Sri Lanka where people have even proposed to help through committees? No. But Mr. Premadasa has now said that precedent. But what do people in Colombo say? Some of them. They say, oh, what can committees do? But if you look at the powers of the Committee of Public Finance, COPF, and the core committee, you would know, Kusum, that with the right people in it, and not with government stooges, these have far-reaching powers.
Yes.
These have sort of judicial powers where you can recommend what your findings to a judicial body, or you can summon these members to parliament and you can get an explanation from them, and they are bound by law to answer.
Right.
And if they are not willing to make us help through committees, so be it.